Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. In today's episode, we'll make some pain au levain, or simply sourdough bread. Just sounds more fancy when you say it in French, right? It is a super simple sourdough recipe, and it works. It's tasty, it doesn't take too much time to make, well at least in sourdough terms. It also doesn't take too much effort either. Look at that, nice soft interior, crusty outside. Let's get on with it. As always, you'll find a full recipe with all the details down in the description box, with metric and imperial units. So first things first, let's see what equipment we need. We'll need a bowl, scales, dough scraper, temperature probe, and for baking bread, I'm going to use this cast iron skillet with the lid. This is really crucial for the sourdough baker. And if you are into your baking, then I would suggest getting one of these. It will last you a lifetime as well. I'll also need a bread basket, but if you don't have one, just use a cake tin lined with tea towel. I'll leave a link for the cast iron pot down in the description if you're interested. I'd suggest using a razor for slashing the dough, but a sharp knife will also do. Now on to the ingredients. We'll need some strong white bread flour, some rye flour, salt, water, and a sourdough starter that's nice and active. And for some tips on keeping your starter active, click the link in top right corner. Right, first things first, as the name of this bread suggests, we need to make a leaven. We'll take some of the water, a little bit of the sourdough starter, and a portion of the white flour. Mix together and we'll ferment it for 10 to 12 hours. And if you don't have sourdough starter, why are you watching this video? Click the link in top right corner now for a full guide on how to make your own one. Now making a leaven is as simple as this. You just take the water, add the starter, add the flour, mix it all together till there's no more dry flour, then cover it up and leave it to ferment. Now every starter is different and the conditions in every kitchen are different, so yours might take longer, it may take less time. It's up to you to learn how your starter reacts. But I fermented this leaven for 12 hours and it was just about right. It definitely should more than double in size. Now before we start adding the leaven, we need to auto-lease the flour. I'm using cold water here. And to learn more about dough temperature, click the link in top right corner. I have videos for everything. So what you want to do here is mix the remaining water with the remaining white flour and the rye flour. We want to hydrate this mix before we start kneading it. This process is called autolyzation. It's quite beneficial for the dough. And I also have a full video on that topic. And once you finish mixing your dough, until there's no more dry flour, sprinkle over the salt and dimple it in with a wet hand. We will just leave the salt to hydrate on top of the dough. It'll make it easier for us to mix it in later on. Now we're not adding the starter yet, but it's nice and bubbly. Actually it started collapsing a bit already, but that's fine. Now make sure your starter is not runny, liquidy, because if it is, then it's over fermented. So at this point, you want to cover your dough and leave it auto-lease for 30 to 60 minutes. If your leaven is really starting to collapse back, then do 30 minutes, you don't want to wait for too long. Now we can add the last ingredient. You don't want the leaven touching the salt directly, so fold the dough over just to seal in the salt. You can also flip it upside down. And now we can add the leaven. So at this point really make sure that it's not runny, because if it is, you can just stop here and start over. But as you can see, when I pick it up and pull it's nice and stretchy, super glutinous. And now just mash it into the dough. And once everything's mixed up, tip it out on the table and start kneading. This dough is not too wet, so I'm going to use a regular kneading method. What I like to do is press down and forwards with the heel of my right hand. Then using the fingers of my left hand, I fold the piece of dough under the heel of my right hand. Then turn and repeat. Once you've done this a few times, the motion will become fluent. You want to knead the dough for 5 to 6 minutes in total. Because we're using a little bit of rye flour here, it does get a little bit sticky. So grab your scraper and once in a while scrape everything together. Kneading dough by hand really warms it up. That's why I used cold water earlier. But it's been about 6 minutes. The dough is nice and smooth. It's not too sticky anymore. I still want to handle it with wet hands. But it looks strong. It's nice and stretchy. Now we can shape it into a ball. Pop it into a bowl. Take the temperature and start fermenting. I want this dough to be around 25 to 26 degrees Celsius, which is 77 to 79 Fahrenheit. And look at that, 25 on the dot. Perfect. Now let's cover this baby up and leave it to proof. The bulk fermentation will take around 3 hours. I want to give it a fold halfway through, so I'm going to leave it for an hour and a half now, let it rise, and then give it a fold. It should definitely start puffing up a bit during the first proof. Alright, it's folding time now. Folding benefits the dough in a number of ways. You'll degas it, you'll create extra layers in gluten structure, and will equalize the temperature throughout the dough, thus giving us an even fermentation. To perform a fold, release your dough from the bowl, place it smooth side down on the table, flatten it out, then fold the edge over the middle, going around in a circle until you reach point where you started. Then flip it smooth side up again, tighten it against the table, and that's your fold done. Make sure not to use too much flour, otherwise the dough will not stick to itself, and you'll struggle to shape it into a ball. And place it back into the bowl, smooth side pointing up. Now cover it up again, and leave it to proof for another hour and a half. Now it should really start puffing up. But if it's not, then leave it for longer. Shape the dough when the dough is ready, not when you're ready. But this looks about right to me. Now to shape it, dust your dough with flour, release it from the bowl, place it down on the table, smooth side down. Now gently flatten it out and stretch it out a little bit, and make sure not to use too much flour. So fold one side over the middle, then cross the other side over the first side, and then starting from the top, roll and tuck, roll and tuck. Then you can fold in the corners at the end if you want. You want it to be nice and tight. Because this dough is not too wet, it's really easy to shape. Even a beginner could do this. Now grab your bread basket and dust it lightly with flour. And take your loaf and place it in the basket, smooth side pointing down. And you can pinch the seam at the bottom together. And now we're ready for the final fermentation. Cover it up and leave it for around 3 hours. You want it to almost double in size. And during the final hour of fermentation, preheat your oven to 230 degrees C with the fan off, and also preheat your pan. And look at that dough puffing up, it's beautiful. And if yours doesn't look like this, leave it for longer. But I'm happy with it. I'm ready to bake. The cast iron pot really helps with baking breads like these. Because it's a sealed environment, it keeps the steam inside, thus preventing the dough from drying out and setting too early. That's why you want the pot blazing hot, and you want to bake the dough with the lid on for the first half of the bake. Dust the bottom of the dough lightly with flour, also dust the top a little bit. It'll make it easier to slash, but you don't want too much here. Now grab the razor blade or sharp knife and do one long cut. Cut it at an angle and make sure it's from end to end. If you need to correct it, do it. Alright, so let's pop the lid on and bake it for 25 minutes. Then pull it out after 25 minutes, take the lid off. This is absolutely my favorite part, because you never know what's going to be underneath there. But this looks quite good, so let's pop it back in the oven for 15 more minutes. And that's your pain à levain, or sourdough bread. Call it what you want, it's delicious and easy to make. And as always, if you have any questions or suggestions, drop them down in the comments. Subscribe for more videos. Thank you for watching, I'll see you in the next one.